The screams echoing through the pine forest made Zachary Holden drop his axe and run before his mind could fully process what he was hearing. He had been cutting firewood at the edge of his property when the sound pierced the cold autumn air. A woman's voice raw with terror and something else, something that sounded like fury mixed with desperation. His boots pounded against the carpet of fallen needles as he crashed through the undergrowth, his heart hammering against his ribs. The forest this close to the frontier was dangerous enough without whatever was making those sounds. But Zachary had learned during his years as a soldier that sometimes running toward the screaming was the only decent thing a man could do. When he burst into the small clearing, the scene before him made him skid to a halt. A woman was backed against a massive pine tree, her arms spread wide as if trying to make herself larger, and surrounding her in a loose semicircle were 5 gray wolves, their hackles raised and teeth bared. But it was not just any woman. Even from 30 feet away, Zachary could see the distinctive green hue of her skin, the way her dark hair was bound back in a warrior's braid, and when she snarled at the advancing wolves, he caught the flash of small tusks protruding from her lower jaw, an orc. For a moment, every instinct in his body screamed at him to turn around and walk away. He had fought orcs during the border wars 5 years ago, had seen what their warriors could do with an axe or blade. The propaganda posters in every town still showed them as monsters, raiders who burned villages and slaughtered innocents. But then one of the wolves lunged, and the orc woman kicked out with a booted foot that caught it square in the chest, sending it yelping backward. Her movements were desperate, and Zachary could see now that her left arm hung at an odd angle, possibly broken, and blood soaked through her leather vest on one side. She was injured, outnumbered, and about to die. Zachary did not let himself think any further. He grabbed a fallen branch as thick as his forearm and charged into the clearing, roaring at the top of his lungs. The wolves' heads whipped toward him, startled by this new threat, and in that moment of distraction, Zachary swung the branch in a wide arc that connected with the nearest wolf's skull with a sickening crack. The animal went down hard, and suddenly the pack's attention was divided between 2 targets instead of 1. "Get behind me," Zachary shouted, positioning himself between the orc woman and the wolves. He could feel her staring at him, could sense her confusion and suspicion even without looking, but she was smart enough not to question good fortune in the middle of a fight. She moved to his left side, her back still protected by the tree, and together they formed a defensive position that was significantly harder to overwhelm than either of them alone. The wolves circled, their yellow eyes calculating. Pack hunters were smart, Zachary knew. They would probe for weakness, wait for an opening. But he also knew they preferred easy prey, and 2 opponents who were clearly willing to fight made this meal far more trouble than it was worth. He feinted toward the largest wolf, the alpha by the look of it, and was rewarded when it backed up a step, testing, always testing. "There are rocks by your feet," the orc woman said, her voice a low contralto roughened by pain. "I can throw with my right hand." Zachary risked a glance down and saw she was correct. Several stones, each about the size of a fist, lay scattered near the tree's roots. "On 3, he said. 1, 2, 3. On 3, he lunged forward with a shout while she grabbed a stone and hurled it with surprising accuracy. The rock struck one of the smaller wolves on its flank, and the animal yelped. The alpha growled, a deep rumbling sound, but when Zachary took another aggressive step forward, swinging his branch in a wide, intimidating arc, something shifted in the pack's collective decision-making. The alpha turned its head slightly, and then, as if by some unspoken signal, the wolves began to retreat. They did not run, maintaining their dignity as apex predators, but they melted back into the forest with the smooth coordination that made wolf packs so effective. The one Zachary had struck with the branch lay motionless in the dirt. Dead or unconscious, he could not tell, but the others had abandoned it either way. The clearing fell silent except for the sound of two people breathing hard. Zachary kept his branch raised for another full minute, watching the shadows between the trees, but the wolves did not return. Finally, when he was reasonably certain the danger had passed, he lowered his makeshift weapon and turned to face the orc woman. She was staring at him with eyes the color of amber, wide with shock and what might have been the beginning stages of blood loss. Now that he could see her clearly, Zachary realized she was in far worse shape than he had initially thought. The wound in her side was deep, probably from a boar spear or hunting knife, and her left arm was definitely broken, bent at an unnatural angle below the elbow. She had clearly been in a fight before the wolves ever found her, and by the look of her torn clothing and the cuts on her face, it had not gone well. "You are human," she said, as if this were the most confusing thing that had happened to her all day. "I am," Zachary agreed. He set the branch down carefully, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. "You are badly hurt. I have a farmhouse about 10 minutes from here. I can help you." She laughed, a short bitter sound that made her wince and clutch at her side. "Why would you help me?" "Your kind and mine are enemies. You should let me bleed out here and collect a bounty on my tusks." The casual way she said it made Zachary's stomach turn. "There is no bounty system in this region," he said quietly. "And I did not leave the army to let wounded people die in my forest. Can you walk?" "Your forest?" She raised one eyebrow, a gesture that looked strange on her angular green face but somehow conveyed perfect skepticism. "I think the trees might disagree about ownership. Legally mine, according to the land charter I paid good silver for," Zachary said. "And you are avoiding the question. Can you walk or not?" She pushed away from the tree, straightening with visible effort, and took one step forward before her legs buckled. Zachary lunged forward and caught her before she hit the ground, getting his shoulder under her good arm and taking most of her weight. She was heavier than a human woman of similar size would have been, all dense muscle and solid bone, but Zachary had spent enough years hauling supplies and working a farm that the weight was manageable. "I suppose that answers that," she muttered against his shoulder. "I can walk with help." "Good enough." Zachary adjusted his grip, making sure not to jostle her injured arm. "What is your name?" She was silent for so long that he thought she might not answer. Then quietly, "Rasha. My name is Rasha." "Zachary," he replied. "Zachary Holden." Retired soldier, current farmer, and apparently rescuer of strangers from wolves. "Hold on to me, Rasha. Getting back to my house is going to be rough." Rough was an understatement. The 10-minute walk that Zachary had mentioned stretched into nearly 30 as they navigated the uneven forest floor. Rasha tried to carry her own weight at first, pride keeping her spine straight and her breathing controlled. But by the time they reached the tree line that marked the edge of Zachary's property, she was leaning heavily against him, and her green skin had taken on a grayish pallor that he did not like one bit. His farmhouse was a simple structure, well built but modest, with a main room that served as kitchen and living space, a bedroom to one side, and a small root cellar below. Zachary had built most of it himself after purchasing the land, using skills he had learned growing up on his parents' farm before the war. It was not much, but it was clean and weatherproof, and most importantly, it was isolated. His nearest neighbor was 3 miles away, which had been exactly what Zachary wanted after his discharge. He had spent enough years surrounded by people, by noise and blood and screaming. The solitude of frontier life suited him. That solitude was about to be complicated significantly. He half-carried Rasha through the front door and helped her to the wooden bench near his fireplace. She collapsed onto it with a grunt of pain, her amber eyes tracking him warily as he moved around the room, gathering supplies. Water from the pump outside, clean rags from the cupboard, the medical kit he had assembled from his army gear, and supplemented with purchases from the traveling merchants who passed through twice a year. "I need to see how bad that wound in your side is," Zachary said, setting everything on the small table. "Which means I need to remove your vest." Rasha's hand moved to the fastening of her leather vest, protective even now. "You are a physician, field medic during the war." "I have sewn up my share of injuries." He met her eyes steadily. "I am going to help you whether you trust me or not, but this will be easier if you do not fight me the entire time." She studied his face for a long moment, and Zachary wondered what she saw there. He was 32 years old, with the weathered skin of someone who worked outdoors, and the lean build of a man who had never quite regained the weight he lost during the siege of Crestfall. His dark blonde hair was tied back in a simple tail, and a scar ran along his left jawline, courtesy of an orcish blade during the Battle of Thornhaven. He realized with a start that Rasha might have been at Thornhaven. She looked to be in her mid-20s, and orc warriors started young. They could have been on opposite sides of that battlefield trying to kill each other. Now he was trying to save her life. War made no sense at all. "Fine," Rasha said finally, and began unlacing her vest with her one good hand. Zachary moved to help when she struggled with the knots, and together they managed to peel the blood-stiffened leather away from her body. Underneath, she wore a simple linen shirt that had once been gray but was now mostly red on the left side. That came off next, leaving her in a wrapped chest binding that she kept in place with her good hand while Zachary examined the wound. It was a puncture, definitely from a spear or blade, that had gone in below her ribs and angled upward. Deep, but not immediately fatal, assuming infection did not set in. The bleeding had slowed to a seep, which was good. It meant no major blood vessels had been severed. "This is going to hurt," Zachary warned, pouring water over the wound to clean it. Rasha hissed through her teeth but did not cry out, her jaw clenched so hard he could see the muscles jumping beneath her skin. He worked as quickly as he could, cleaning away the dried blood and dirt, checking for any debris in the wound itself. Finding none, he threaded a needle with gut string and began to sew. Rasha's breathing turned shallow and fast, but she held perfectly still, her good hand gripping the edge of the bench hard enough that her knuckles paled. Zachary had sewn up men who screamed and thrashed, who had to be held down by 3 of their comrades. The fact that Rasha endured in silence spoke to either incredible pain tolerance or extensive experience with injuries. Probably both. "How did this happen?" he asked, partly to distract her and partly because he genuinely wanted to know. "Hunters," she said, the word coming out through gritted teeth. 3 of them. I was tracking a deer near the river when they found me. They did not ask questions, just attacked. I killed one and wounded another, but the third got me with his spear before I could close the distance. I ran into the forest and lost them somewhere near the marshes, but the wolves picked up my blood trail." "You killed a man." Zachary kept his voice neutral, focused on his stitching. "He was trying to kill me first," Rasha said flatly. "I will not apologize for surviving. I am not asking you to." Zachary tied off the last stitch and reached for a clean cloth to bandage the wound. "For what it is worth, those hunters should not have been on this land either. My property extends to the river on the eastern border. If they were hunting here, they were trespassing." "Your property," Rasha repeated, that same skeptical tone in her voice. Humans and your endless need to own everything. Do the deer know they are supposed to stay within your boundary lines? The deer can go where they please, Zachary said dryly. But hunters who attack people get no sympathy from me, regardless of species. He finished wrapping the bandage and tied it securely. Now for your arm. This is going to be worse than the stitches. Rasha looked at her left arm, at the obvious bend in the bone, and for the first time since they entered the house, Zachary saw real fear flicker across her face. You have to set it. I do. He pulled the table closer and positioned her arm on the flat surface. Have you ever had a bone set before? Twice. Ribs and collarbone. She was breathing faster now, her pupils dilated. I know what is coming. Zachary wished he had something to give her for the pain, but frontier medicine was limited to what a person could grow or make themselves, and he had not yet mastered the art of brewing effective painkillers. On 3, he said, positioning his hands on either side of the break. 1, 2. He pulled on 2 instead of 3, using the element of surprise to prevent her from tensing up at the wrong moment. There was a grinding crunch as the bone slid back into place, and this time Rasha did scream, a raw sound that cut off almost immediately as she bit down on her own hand to muffle it. Tears streamed down her green cheeks, but she did not pull away, did not fight him as he quickly splinted the arm with straight pieces of wood and more bandages. When he was finished, Rasha slumped forward, her forehead resting against the table, her breathing ragged. Zachary gave her a moment, then gently touched her shoulder. The worst is over. You need to rest now. I need to leave, Rasha said into the table. If those hunters come looking for their friend, if they track me here, they will kill both of us. Let them try. Zachary's voice came out harder than he intended. I did not pull you out of one fight just to throw you to the wolves, literal or otherwise. You are staying until you are healed enough to travel safely, and that is final. Rasha lifted her head to stare at him, those amber eyes searching his face. Why? She asked, and the genuine confusion in her voice made Zachary's chest ache. Why do you care what happens to me? Your people and mine have been enemies for generations. Because I am tired of enemies, Zachary said quietly. I spent 5 years killing people I did not know for reasons I barely understood. I came out here to get away from all that, to build something instead of destroying it. And maybe that makes me a fool, but I cannot watch someone die when I have the skills to save them. I will not do it. Not anymore. Rasha was silent for a long time. Then she nodded slowly, exhaustion clear in every line of her body. I will stay until I can travel, but I will not be a burden. If I am here, I work. You are injured, Zachary pointed out. I have 1 good arm and 2 good legs I can manage. She tried to stand and swayed immediately. Zachary caught her again, and this time he simply picked her up, ignoring her protest, and carried her into his bedroom. It was a small space, barely large enough for the narrow bed and a chest for his clothes, but it was warm and the mattress was stuffed with fresh straw and wool. He set Rasha down on the bed with as much care as he could manage. Rest, he said firmly. You can argue with me about working when you can stand without falling over. She looked like she wanted to argue anyway, but another wave of exhaustion washed over her face and she sagged back against the pillow. You are bossy, she muttered. I am practical, Zachary corrected. He pulled a blanket over her, noting that even with the bandages and splint, she looked dangerously vulnerable lying there. Her eyes were already drifting closed. Sleep, Rasha. You are safe here. Safe, she repeated, the words slurred with approaching unconsciousness. I have not been safe in a very long time. Zachary waited until her breathing evened out into the deep rhythm of sleep, then quietly left the room, pulling the door mostly closed behind him. He stood in his main room, staring at nothing in particular, and tried to process what he had just done. He had brought an orc into his home. An orc warrior who had admitted to killing a human hunter just hours ago. If anyone found out, the consequences would be severe. The towns in this region maintained an uneasy truce with the orc clans that lived in the mountain territories to the north, but that truce was built on mutual avoidance, not acceptance. Humans who harbored orcs were considered traitors. Orcs who showed mercy to humans were seen as weak. Zachary walked to his small window and looked out at the forest, at the land he had worked so hard to tame. He had come here to escape the war, to find peace in isolation. Instead, he had just dragged the war straight into his home. But when he closed his eyes, all he could see was Rasha backed against that tree, injured and desperate, fighting for her life against impossible odds. He had made the only choice he could live with. He just hoped they would both survive the consequences. The first 3 days were tense. Rasha slept most of the time, her body demanding rest to heal from the blood loss and trauma. When she was awake, she watched Zachary with wary eyes, tracking his movements around the house as if expecting him to attack her at any moment. Zachary could not blame her for the suspicion. He was surprised by it in himself, how quickly he had adapted to having her in his space, how he found himself listening for sounds from the bedroom to make sure she was still breathing. On the 4th morning, he woke to find Rasha in his main room, sitting at his table with a pile of vegetables he had harvested the day before. She had somehow managed to get herself out of bed and dressed in one of his old shirts, which hung loose on her frame but was considerably cleaner than her blood-stained clothing. She was clumsily peeling potatoes with her right hand, her broken left arm held carefully against her chest in its splint. "I told you I would work," she said without looking up when she heard him enter. "I also told you to rest." Zachary moved to the fireplace to build up the banked coals into a proper fire. "You are going to tear your stitches." "The stitches are fine, I checked." She set down a peeled potato and reached for another. "I am going mad lying in that bed doing nothing. Give me tasks I can manage with one hand, or I will start taking this place apart to see how it is built." There was no heat in her voice, just a matter-of-fact statement, but Zachary found himself smiling despite his concern. "You are that bored." "I am a scout and hunter for my clan," Rasha said. "I am used to traveling 20 miles in a day, not lying still and staring at walls." Boredom does not begin to describe it. "Your clan," Zachary repeated carefully, adding wood to the fire. "Are they going to come looking for you?" Rasha's hand stilled on the potato. When she spoke again, her voice was flat. "No, they cast me out 6 months ago. I am clanless now." "Why?" "Because I refused to kill a human child." She set down the knife and met his eyes directly. "There was a raid on a border settlement. It was supposed to be a quick strike against the militia post, but some of our warriors got carried away, started going after civilians. I found one of them in a home with a boy who could not have been more than 8 years old. He was going to bash the child's head in with a hammer. I stopped him. We fought. I broke his arm and 3 of his ribs." Zachary had been reaching for his cookpot but froze at her words. "What happened to the child?" "I sent him running to a neighbor's house and told him to hide until the raiders left. He lived, as far as I know." Rasha picked up the knife again, studying it as if she had never seen a peeling knife before. "When we returned to camp, the warrior I fought told everyone what I had done. The clan council held a trial. They said I had betrayed my people, that I had shown weakness and mercy to the enemy. They gave me a choice: accept exile or be executed for cowardice." "That is not cowardice," Zachary said quietly. "That is honor." Rasha's laugh was bitter. "Honor is apparently species-specific. What looks like honor to you looks like treason to my people." Zachary carried the pot to the table and began filling it with the vegetables Rasha had peeled. For what it is worth, you made the right choice. Wars are fought between warriors. Children should never be targets. Tell that to the humans who burned orc villages during the Westmark campaign, Rasha said. I saw the aftermath of one of those attacks. Women and children dead in their homes because human soldiers decided we were all monsters who needed to be wiped out. The Westmark campaign. Zachary remembered it. He had not been there himself, stationed on the Eastern Front at the time, but he had heard the stories. Some officers had taken a scorched earth approach, deciding that the only way to break the orc clan's power was to destroy their homes and food supplies. Collateral damage had been expected, encouraged even by some commanders. It made him sick to think about it now, here in his kitchen with an exiled orc woman who had given up everything to save a human child. I am sorry, Zachary said finally, for what was done to your people, for all of it. You did not burn those villages. No, but I wore the same uniform as the men who did. I fought in the same war. He set the pot over the fire to boil and returned to the table. I am not going to tell you that humans are better than orcs, or that your people are the only ones who committed atrocities. Every side in that war did things that cannot be justified. That is why I left. Rasha tilted her head, studying him with those unsettling amber eyes. You were a soldier for 5 years and you just left. They let you walk away. My term of service ended. I completed my contract, took my discharge pay, and bought this land. Zachary pulled out a chair and sat across from her. I did not re-enlist despite them offering me a promotion. I had seen enough death. So you came here to hide from the world. I came here to build a life that does not involve killing people, Zachary corrected. There is a difference. They fell silent for a moment, the only sound the crackle of the fire and the gentle bubbling of water beginning to heat. Then Rasha said, "Thank you for saving me. For this." She gestured around the room with her good hand. I know what risk you are taking. You are welcome. Zachary stood and moved to his shelves to gather herbs for the soup. For however long you need to stay, this is a safe place. I give you my word. The word of a human soldier, Rasha said, but there was something different in her tone now. Not quite warmth, but at least the beginning of trust. The word of Zachary Holden, he replied. Former soldier, current farmer, and apparently occasional rescuer of people from wolves. Now eat something before you pass out again. You are still recovering. The days began to settle into a routine. Rasha's strength returned gradually, and with it came a fierce determination to make herself useful. Zachary would wake to find her already up, awkwardly preparing breakfast with one hand or tending to the fire. She could not do heavy labor with her arm in a splint, but she found ways to contribute regardless. She sorted the vegetables from his root cellar, mended his clothes with surprisingly neat one-handed stitches, and spent hours slowly chopping wood into kindling using a technique that involved bracing the larger pieces with her foot. Zachary tried to tell her she did not need to do so much, but Rasha was stubborn in a way that reminded him of the mountains themselves, immovable and uncompromising. I do not accept charity, she told him flatly, when he suggested she take another day to rest. If I am eating your food and sleeping under your roof, I contribute. That is how things work. So Zachary stopped arguing and instead found tasks she could safely manage. He taught her how to operate his spinning wheel, which she took to with surprising speed, and soon she was producing yarn from his sheep's wool with the kind of focused intensity she probably once applied to tracking prey through forests. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Zachary mending tools or preparing materials for the next day's work while Rasha spun wool into thread, and sometimes they would talk. Those conversations were cautious at first, carefully neutral topics like the best way to preserve meat for winter or how to identify medicinal plants. But gradually, as the days passed and trust built layer by layer like sediment forming stone, they began to share more. Zachary told her about growing up on his parents' farm in the Midlands, about his father who had died when Zachary was 16, and his mother who had remarried a merchant and moved to the coast. He talked about joining the army partly for the steady pay and partly because he had not known what else to do with his life. He described battles he had fought, friends he had lost, and the slow erosion of his belief that the war had any real purpose beyond perpetuating itself. Rasha spoke of her childhood in the mountain clans, of learning to hunt from her mother and fight from her father. She described the complex honor codes that governed orc society, the way reputation and prowess determined status, and how deeply shameful exile was in their culture. She talked about the forests and peaks she had explored, the animals she had tracked, and the strange beauty of orcs singing that echoed through the mountain valleys on festival nights. "You miss it?" Zachary asked one evening as they sat by the fire. Outside, the first snow of the season was beginning to fall, coating his fields in white. Rasha was quiet for a long moment, her hand stilled on the spinning wheel. "I miss parts of it," she said finally. "I miss my sister. She is younger than me, only 19, and when I was exiled she cried and said the council was wrong. But she still has a place in the clan, a future there. I could not ask her to give that up for me. That must have been hard. It was necessary." Rasha resumed spinning, the wheel clicking softly as it turned. "I made my choice knowing the consequences. I do not regret saving that child. I would do it again." "I know you would," Zachary said quietly, and realized as he said it that it was absolutely true. In the weeks since he had brought Rasha to his farm, he had come to understand her character with surprising clarity. She was fierce and proud, yes, but also fundamentally decent in a way that transcended species or culture. She had a moral center that did not bend even when bending would have been easier. It was, he realized with a start, an attractive quality. More than attractive. Admirable. He looked at her sitting there in the firelight, her green skin seeming to glow warmly in the orange light, her strong features relaxed in a way they rarely were during daylight hours. She was beautiful, he realized. Not in the conventional way human women were beautiful, but in her own right. The small tusks that curved up from her lower jaw gave her face character. Her pointed ears, visible now that she often left her hair loose around the house, were oddly elegant. And her amber eyes, when they met his across the fire, held depths he found himself wanting to explore. Zachary looked away quickly, unsettled by the direction of his thoughts. She was his guest, under his protection and currently injured. Those thoughts had no place here. But that night, lying in his bedroll on the main room floor where he had been sleeping since giving Rasha his bed, Zachary found himself staring at the ceiling and thinking about the sound of her laugh when he had made a particularly bad joke over dinner. She laughed so rarely, treating life with a seriousness that probably came from months of surviving alone in hostile territory. But when she did laugh, it was a full-bodied sound that seemed to surprise even her. He wanted to make her laugh more often. He wanted a lot of things he should not want. Zachary rolled over and firmly told himself to go to sleep, but it was a long time before he succeeded. The snow continued to fall throughout the night and into the next day, a heavy storm that blanketed Zachary's farm in nearly a foot of white powder. He woke early, stoked the fire back to life, and pulled on his heavy coat to go check on his animals. The sheep were huddled together in their shelter, but they had food and water and seemed content enough. His small flock of chickens were less pleased about the weather, voicing their complaints with loud squawking, but they too were secure and healthy. When Zachary returned to the house, stamping snow off his boots at the door, he found Rasha standing at the window, staring out at the white landscape with an expression he could not quite read. "Have you seen snow before?" he asked, hanging his coat on its peg. "Of course. The mountains get heavy snow every winter." She did not look away from the window. "But I have never seen it fall on farmland like this. In the mountains, snow means danger, difficulty. Here it just looks peaceful." Zachary moved to stand beside her, following her gaze across his fields. The storm had transformed everything, softening harsh edges and turning his practical farm into something almost magical. "It is peaceful," he agreed. "For now. In a week I will be cursing it when I have to haul water through ice and dig out paths to every building. But for today, it is beautiful." "You like it here," Rasha said. It was not a question. "I do." Zachary gestured to the window to the land beyond. "This place is mine in a way nothing has ever been mine before. Every fence post, every garden bed, every improvement, I built it with my own hands. When I was in the army, I was just another body following orders. Here I make my own choices, even the choice to shelter an orc who could get you killed. Especially that choice." He turned to face her fully. "Rasha, you have been here for 3 weeks now. Have you noticed anyone coming around? Any neighbors stopping by?" She shook her head slowly. "That is because my nearest neighbor is 3 miles away and everyone knows I prefer to be left alone. Merchants come by twice a year, and sometimes I ride to town for supplies, but otherwise I can go months without seeing another human. You are as safe here as anywhere, at least until spring when travel becomes easier." "Spring is 5 months away." Rasha's voice was carefully neutral. "I know." Zachary met her eyes. "You can stay that long if you want, longer if needed. Your arm will take at least 2 months to heal properly, and winter travel is dangerous even for someone in perfect health." "You would let me stay through the entire winter?" "I would." He hesitated, then added, "Honestly, it would be nice to have the company. Turns out I am not as fond of complete solitude as I thought I was." Something shifted in Rasha's expression, a subtle softening around her eyes. "You are strange, Zachary Holden, but I am beginning to think you might be the best human I have ever met." "The best?" Zachary raised an eyebrow. "That is high praise. Do not let it go to your head. The competition is not exactly fierce." Zachary laughed, and after a moment, Rasha smiled too. It was a small smile, barely a curve of her lips, but it lit up her face in a way that made Zachary's breath catch. He was in so much trouble. Winter deepened, and with it came a domesticity that Zachary had never experienced before. He had lived alone for 2 years since buying the farm, and before that, he had lived in military camps surrounded by other soldiers. The rhythm of sharing space with another person, of coordinating meals and chores and quiet evenings by the fire, was entirely new territory. It should have been awkward. Rasha was not human, came from a completely different culture, and had every reason to distrust him. But somehow it worked. They developed unspoken routines. Zachary would wake first and tend to the animals while Rasha prepared breakfast. During the day, they would work on separate tasks, but always within sight of each other, occasionally calling out comments or questions. Evenings were for maintenance work and conversation, and sometimes Rasha would tell stories from orc folklore while Zachary listened, fascinated by the glimpses into a culture he had only ever seen from the wrong end of a battlefield. "We have a saying," Rasha told him one night while she awkwardly stirred a pot of stew with her right hand. Her left arm was still splinted, though Zachary planned to remove the splint in another week to check the bone's progress. "Strength without honor is tyranny, and honor without strength is martyrdom. What does that mean practically? Zachary was carving a new handle for a shovel that had broken earlier that week. It means that being strong is not enough. You must also be just fair, use your strength to protect rather than to dominate. Rasha tapped the spoon against the pot's edge. But honor alone will not save you if you lack the strength to back it up. Both are necessary. A true warrior must have both. Is that why you stopped that other warrior from killing the child? Zachary asked. Because it would have been strength without honor, partially. Rasha's voice went quiet, but also because he reminded me of my nephew. Same age, same dark hair. I looked at him and thought, what if someone did this to my sister's child? How could I ask the spirits to protect my family if I did not protect someone else's child? Your people believe in spirits. Everything has a spirit, Rasha said. The trees, the rivers, the mountains. Even the animals we hunt. When we kill, we thank the animal's spirit for its sacrifice. When we harvest wood, we leave an offering for the tree's spirit. We are part of a cycle, not separate from it. Zachary thought about that, about the way he had been taught to view the world as something to be controlled, dominated, bent to human will. That is a beautiful way to see things. It is how things are, Rasha corrected, whether humans acknowledge it or not. These conversations were deepening Zachary's understanding not just of orcs in general, but of Rasha specifically. She was complicated in ways he had never expected. Fierce in battle but gentle with his chickens, who she fed every morning with surprising patience. Practical about violence, but deeply philosophical about its meaning and necessity. Proud of her heritage, but willing to question her culture's choices when they conflicted with her personal ethics. And somewhere in the midst of all those conversations, all those shared meals and mutual chores and quiet evenings, Zachary realized he was falling for her. It was not a sudden revelation but a gradual awareness, like watching dawn break over his fields. One day he simply understood that he looked forward to waking up because it meant seeing Rasha, that he made extra food not out of obligation, but because he liked watching her eat with such obvious enjoyment, that the sound of her voice had become his favorite sound in the world. He was falling in love with an orc woman, and he had absolutely no idea what to do about it. The problem was complicated by the fact that he had no idea how Rasha felt. She was friendly enough and clearly comfortable in his home, but that was a far cry from attraction. For all Zachary knew, she saw him purely as a convenient shelter against winter and a means of survival. Once spring came and her arm healed, she would leave, and he would never see her again. The thought made his chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with physical pain. "You are quiet today," Rasha observed one afternoon in midwinter. They were working together to repair a section of fence that had been damaged by the snow's weight. Well, Zachary was repairing it while Rasha held the board steady with her good hand. Her splint had come off a week earlier, and while her left arm was still weak, she could use it for light tasks now. "Just thinking," Zachary said, hammering a nail into place with more force than strictly necessary. About what? About spring. It was not a lie. He was thinking about spring, about what would happen when the snow melted and travel became possible again. What about spring? Rasha shifted her grip on the board to accommodate his next nail. "You will be able to leave then, if you want to." Zachary focused very intently on his hammering. "Your arm should be fully healed by then." Rasha was silent for so long that Zachary finally looked up. She was staring at him with an expression he could not quite read. "Do you want me to leave?" "No." The word came out more forcefully than he intended. "No, I do not want you to leave." "But you have been here almost 2 months now. You must be eager to move on, to have your freedom back." "Freedom to do what exactly?" Rasha's voice had an edge to it now. I am clanless, Zachary. I have no home to return to, no family who will claim me. The human territories want me dead just for existing, and the orc territories see me as a traitor. Where exactly do you think I am eager to go? Zachary set down his hammer. I did not think about it like that. I am sorry. I am not asking for pity. Rasha released the board and stepped back, crossing her arms. I am just telling you the reality. This farm, these past 2 months, this has been the most stability I have had since my exile. And yes, part of that is practical. You have food and shelter, and I need both. But it is not just that. What else is it? Zachary's heart was beating faster now. Rasha looked away toward the forest that bordered his property. You treat me like a person, not an orc, not a monster, not a tool or a threat, just a person. Do you know how rare that is? In 6 months of wandering, you are the only human who has shown me basic decency without expecting something in return. I am not special, Zachary said quietly. I am just trying to be decent. That is what makes you special. Rasha turned back to him, and there was something vulnerable in her amber eyes that Zachary had never seen before. Most people do not try. They just follow what they have been taught, hate who they have been told to hate, fear what is different. But you do not. You think for yourself. You make your own choices, even when they are difficult. So do you, Zachary pointed out. You gave up everything rather than compromise your principles. And look where it got me. But there was no bitterness in her voice now, just a kind of wondering realization. Alone on a human farm with a man who pulled me from wolves and stitched my wounds and gave me his bed without asking anything in return. Maybe the spirits have a sense of humor after all. Maybe they do. Zachary took a careful step closer. Rasha, I need to tell you something. She tensed slightly but did not move away. What? I do not want you to leave in the spring. I do not want you to leave ever if I am being honest. The words were coming faster now, pushed out by a combination of fear and hope. These past 2 months have been the best I have had since I left the army. Not because of the help with chores or the company, though both are nice, but because of you specifically. The way you think, the way you see the world, the way you laugh at my terrible jokes even though you pretend not to find them funny. I like who I am when you are around. Rasha stared at him, her expression unreadable. Zachary, you do not have to say anything, Zachary interrupted quickly. I know this is complicated. I know I am human and you are orc and there are about 1,000 reasons why this is a bad idea. But I needed you to know. I needed you to know that when I offer you a place to stay, it is not just charity or temporary shelter. It is a home, for as long as you want it. The silence stretched between them, and Zachary watched a dozen emotions flicker across Rasha's face. Surprise, confusion, something that might have been fear, and finally, slowly, something that looked like hope. You are right, she said finally. This is a bad idea, the worst possible idea. If anyone finds out, they will kill both of us. Humans will see you as a traitor. Orcs will see me as corrupted. I know. We have nothing in common except being damaged by the same war from opposite sides. I know. This is absolutely ridiculous. I know. Zachary allowed himself a small smile. Is there a but coming? Rasha closed the distance between them in 2 quick strides and kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss. It was fierce and desperate, carrying months of loneliness and fear and desperate hope. Her tusks scraped lightly against his lips, an entirely new sensation that somehow felt exactly right. Her good hand fisted in his shirt while her weaker left hand came up to rest against his chest, and Zachary wrapped his arms around her, pulling her closer, marveling at the solid strength of her body and the way she fit against him as if they had been designed specifically for this moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rasha rested her forehead against his shoulder. You are an idiot, Zachary Holden. Probably, he agreed, his arms still around her. But I am an idiot who is completely in love with you. I am in love with you too, Rasha said into his shirt. And yes, I also am an idiot. We can be idiots together. That sounds perfect to me. They stood there in the snow, holding each other while the winter wind whispered through the pines. And Zachary thought that of all the battles he had fought, and all the choices he had made, this moment made every single one of them worthwhile. The next few weeks had a dreamlike quality to them, as if Zachary and Rasha existed in a bubble outside of normal time and space. They worked during the day, the same tasks they had been doing for weeks, but now there were stolen kisses in the barn and hands held across the dinner table. In the evenings, Rasha moved from the bedroom to Zachary's bedroll, and they would lie together by the fire's warmth, talking until they fell asleep in each other's arms. Zachary had been with women before, brief encounters during his military service that had been more about physical need than emotional connection. This was entirely different. This was waking up with Rasha's head on his shoulder and feeling like the luckiest man alive. This was watching her feed his chickens and being struck by how much he wanted this to be his future, every day, for the rest of his life. This was discovering that her skin was the same temperature everywhere, that she tasted faintly of the mint tea she drank in the evenings, that she made a small, contented sound when he ran his fingers through her hair. "Tell me something," Rasha said one night as they lay together, her head on his chest and his arms around her. "Did you ever think during the war that you would end up like this, falling in love with an orc woman?" Zachary pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "No, that never crossed my mind. I mostly thought about surviving long enough to get discharged. I used to hate humans," Rasha said quietly. "Not individually, but as a concept. The enemy, the invaders, the ones who wanted our land and our resources and did not care how many of us died in the process. I remember being 15 and watching human soldiers burn our food stores, and I thought, these are monsters. These are creatures without souls." "What changed?" Zachary asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "I killed my first human when I was 17, Rasha continued as if he had not spoken. "He was a soldier, maybe 20 years old. I put an arrow through his throat during a skirmish. He died fast, but not instantly. He had time to look surprised. Time to pull a letter from his pocket and try to read it one last time before his eyes went blank. She was quiet for a moment, and Zachary just held her, waiting. Afterward, I found the letter. It was from his mother, asking when he would come home, telling him about his sister's wedding and his father's new horse. Ordinary things, loving things. And I realized that he was not a monster. He was just a person who happened to be born on the wrong side of a line drawn by people neither of us had ever met. That was when you started questioning the war," Zachary said. "That was when I started questioning everything." Rasha shifted to look up at him, but it did not matter in the end. "I was still a warrior. I still followed orders. I still fought and killed and pretended that it meant something beyond survival. Right up until the moment I saw that warrior about to kill a child, and suddenly I could not pretend anymore." "I am glad you could not," Zachary said softly. "I am glad you made the choice you did, even though it cost you everything. Because if you had not, you would not have been in those woods. I would not have found you, and I would still be alone, thinking that solitude was what I wanted." "Do you ever worry about what happens next?" Rasha asked. "Spring will come eventually. We cannot hide here forever. I know." It was something Zachary had been thinking about more and more as winter began its slow retreat. "But we can worry about that when the time comes. For now, we are safe. We are together. That is enough." Rasha nodded against his chest, but Zachary could feel the tension in her body. She was a warrior, trained to anticipate threats and plan for contingencies. The uncertainty of their future was probably eating at her far more than she let on. What if we just did not go anywhere? Zachary said suddenly, the thought crystallizing even as he spoke it. What if you stayed here permanently? This farm is isolated enough that no one would need to know you are here. We could build a life here together. Hide for the rest of our lives. There was no judgment in Rasha's voice, just curiosity. Not hide, just live quietly. It is not much different from what I have been doing for 2 years anyway. Zachary shifted so he could see her face. I am not saying it is a perfect solution, but it is an option. I would need to never go to town, never be seen by any of your neighbors or merchants, essentially be a ghost. Rasha was thinking it through, he could see it in her eyes. Could you live like that, always alone except for me? What if you wanted to remarry if I was gone? What if you needed help during harvest or if you got injured? I do not want anyone except you, Zachary said firmly, and we would figure the rest out together. People manage isolated farms all the time. We would be fine. You make it sound simple. Maybe it is. Zachary cupped her face with one hand, his thumb tracing the elegant line of her cheekbone. Maybe we are the ones making it complicated. Two people who care about each other, building a life together that is the most natural thing in the world. The fact that those two people happen to be different species is beside the point. Society would not see it that way. Then society can stay off my property. Rasha laughed, that full-bodied sound that Zachary loved, and kissed him. You are impossible, but I love you anyway. I love you too, Zachary said against her lips. Now stop worrying about the future and come here. She did, and for a while there was no room for worry about anything beyond the warmth of the fire and the feeling of being exactly where they were meant to be. But the future has a way of arriving whether people are ready for it or not. The snow began to melt in early March, revealing the brown earth beneath, and the first brave shoots of spring growth. Zachary began preparing his fields for planting, and Rasha helped despite his protests that she should take it easy after months of limited activity. Her left arm was now fully healed, strong and capable again, and she threw herself into farm work with the same intensity she probably once applied to hunting. They were mucking out the sheep shelter together on a cold but sunny afternoon when they heard the sound of horses approaching. Zachary and Rasha froze, eyes meeting in instant shared alarm. Zachary rarely had visitors and never unannounced. He moved to the shelter's entrance and peered out carefully, Rasha right behind him. 3 riders were approaching up the road, all men, all armed. Even from a distance, Zachary could see the way they sat their horses, the alertness in their posture. Soldiers or experienced fighters, definitely. Inside the house, Zachary said quietly but urgently. Now, hide in the root cellar and do not come out no matter what you hear. Zachary, please. He turned to look at her, knowing his fear was written plainly on his face. Please, Rasha, let me handle this. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded and ran for the house, moving low and fast. Zachary waited until he saw the door close behind her, then walked out into his yard, trying to look casual and surprised rather than terrified. The 3 men reined in their horses near his fence. The one in front was older, maybe 45, with graying hair and the kind of scars that spoke of a long career in violent work. The other 2 were younger, perhaps in their late 20s, but they had the same hard look about them. Help you gentlemen with something. Zachary called out, keeping his voice friendly but not obsequious. Maybe, the older man said. You the owner of this property? I am. Zachary Holden. Bought this land 2 years ago, all legal and proper. Good to know. The man dismounted and his companions followed suit. Name is Marcus Harrow. I am a hunter, licensed by the Crown to track and eliminate dangerous creatures. These are my associates, Owen and Kurt." Zachary's blood ran cold, but he kept his expression neutral. "Congratulations on the license. What brings you to my property?" "We have been tracking an orc through this region," Marcus said, pulling a folded paper from his coat pocket. "Female, about 5'8", green skin, dark hair. She killed 2 hunters about 3 months ago near the Eastern River. You are aware that is your property line, yes?" "I am aware where my property line is," Zachary said carefully. "But I have not seen any orcs. I keep to myself out here, do not get many visitors of any species." Marcus unfolded the paper, which turned out to be a crude wanted poster with a sketch that could have been any orc but was unfortunately close enough to Rasha to be problematic. "You are sure? We tracked her blood trail into these woods. She was badly injured. Either she died out there or someone helped her." "I told you I have not seen any orcs." Zachary met the man's eyes steadily. "Maybe she died and the wolves got her. There are a lot of wolves in those woods." "Maybe." Marcus did not sound convinced. "You mind if we look around?" "Just to be thorough." "Actually, I do mind." Zachary kept his voice level but firm. "This is private property. You do not have a warrant or any evidence of wrongdoing. I am within my rights to refuse a search." "True enough," Marcus agreed. "But you have to admit, refusing looks suspicious. Man living alone out here, no wife, no family, would be easy to hide things. Or people." "I value my privacy," Zachary said. "That is why I live out here. Not because I am hiding anything, but because I did my time in the war and earned the right to some peace and quiet. Now, unless you have actual evidence that I have done something illegal, I am going to have to ask you to leave." The 3 hunters exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then Marcus nodded slowly. "Fair enough, Mr. Holden. We will be on our way. But just so you know, the bounty on that orc is 200 gold crowns, dead or alive. That is a lot of money. If you happen to remember seeing something, anything at all, you can find me at the tavern in Millbrook. Just ask for Marcus Harrow." "I will keep that in mind," Zachary said, though his stomach was churning. 200 gold crowns was a fortune, more money than most people saw in a year. The fact that someone was willing to pay that much meant Rasha had not just killed hunters, she had killed someone important. Someone with family or allies who wanted revenge. The hunters mounted their horses, but Marcus paused before turning away. "One more thing, Mr. Holden. If you are hiding that orc, you should know that you would be breaking the law. Harboring a known killer is a serious crime. They could take your land, throw you in prison, or worse. Just think about whether whatever you are protecting is worth that risk." "I appreciate the warning," Zachary said dryly. "Now get off my property." Marcus smiled, a cold expression that did not reach his eyes. "Have a good day, Mr. Holden. I am sure we will see you again soon." They rode off at a casual pace, but Zachary noticed that Owen kept looking back toward the house and barn, his eyes scanning for anything unusual. Zachary forced himself to stand casually in his yard, watching them go until they were completely out of sight. Only then did he sprint for the house. "Rasha," he called, pulling open the root cellar's trapdoor. "They are gone. You can come up." Rasha emerged from the cellar, her face set in grim lines. "I heard everything. They were talking to you right above where I was hiding. Then you know we have a problem." Zachary closed the trapdoor and moved to the window, checking for any sign that the hunters had doubled back. "They are not going to give up. That bounty is too high. 200 gold crowns." Rasha's voice was flat. "Do you know whose son I killed? The one during the wolf attack," they said hunters. "One of them must have been Lord Brennan's son. He is a minor noble who holds lands near the eastern border. I did not know who he was at the time, just that he and his friends were trying to kill me. But if his father has put up a bounty that high, he must want revenge badly. Zachary turned from the window to face her. What do you want to do? I should leave. Rasha's jaw was set, her amber eyes reflecting determination and something that might have been despair. If I am not here, they have no proof you helped me. You can claim ignorance and they will have to move on eventually. No. The word came out harsher than Zachary intended. You are not leaving. We will figure this out together. Zachary, they will come back. They will search the property whether you give permission or not, and when they find me, they will kill me and probably you too for harboring me. Rasha moved toward him, taking his hands in hers. I cannot let that happen. You saved my life. I will not repay that by getting you killed. I did not save your life just to let you walk away now, Zachary said fiercely. I love you, Rasha. That does not change because of some bounty hunters. Love does not stop arrows or swords. But there were tears in her eyes now, the first time Zachary had ever seen her cry. I am trying to protect you. Then let me protect you back. Zachary pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. We will leave, both of us, tonight. We will pack what we can carry. Take the sheep and chickens to a neighbor's farm with a note saying I need to travel for family reasons, and we will head north into the deep mountains. Find somewhere even more remote than this. Start over. You would give up your farm. This place you built with your own hands. I would give up anything for you, Zachary said simply. The farm is just land and wood. You are what matters. Rasha pulled back to look at him, searching his face. Whatever she saw there must have convinced her because she nodded slowly. North into the mountains. It will be dangerous. The orc clans might not accept us, but at least humans rarely travel that far into their territory. Then we will find unclaimed land, build a new homestead. It will be harder, but we will manage. Zachary was already thinking through logistics. We can leave after dark. Travel at night for the first week to avoid being seen. Hunt for food along the way. I have most of my old military gear stored in the barn. We will be able to defend ourselves if necessary. You have thought about this before, Rasha said with a slight smile despite her tears. I have thought about contingency plans for every possible problem since the day I brought you home, Zachary admitted. Force of habit from being a soldier. Always have an escape route. They spent the rest of the afternoon in tense preparation. Zachary packed his most essential tools, warm clothing, weapons, and what preserved food he could carry. Rasha gathered her own meager possessions and helped him sort through what to take and what to leave behind. It was heartbreaking to look at the home Zachary had built, knowing he was about to abandon it. But every time doubt crept in, he looked at Rasha and remembered what mattered most. As the sun began to set, Zachary wrote a brief note for his neighbor explaining that a family emergency required him to travel indefinitely and asking them to take care of his animals. He left it weighted down on his table along with a silver coin to compensate for the trouble. Then he and Rasha slipped out of the house in the gathering darkness, their packs on their backs and determination in their hearts. They were about 100 yards into the forest when they heard shouts from the direction of the farm. Zachary and Rasha exchanged horrified looks and then ran, diving deeper into the trees as the sounds of pursuit erupted behind them. The hunters had come back, probably sneaking up while waiting for darkness, planning to search the property while Zachary supposedly slept. Instead, they had found an empty house and obvious signs of flight. They will track us, Rasha gasped as they crashed through undergrowth. I know. Zachary veered toward a rocky stream he knew ran through this part of the forest. Water. We need to mask our scent and trail. They splashed into the freezing stream, gasping at the cold, and began wading upstream. The water was only knee-deep, but the current was strong and the rocks underfoot were treacherous. Behind them, Zachary could hear the hunters spreading out, calling to each other as they searched. Over here. Fresh tracks. They are heading north, probably going for the mountains. We can cut them off at Miller's Pass. Zachary and Rasha kept moving, pushing through the water until Zachary's legs were numb from the cold. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, he steered them out of the stream and onto a rocky outcropping that would not hold footprints. "This way," he whispered, leading Rasha along the stone and then into a dense thicket of pine trees. "Stay low. Move slowly. If we are lucky, they will assume we stayed in the water longer and push ahead of our actual position." They crept through the forest, every sound amplified by fear and adrenaline. Zachary could hear the hunters behind them, but the sounds were growing more distant. His gambit might have worked. They traveled through the night, stopping only when necessary, always listening for pursuit. By the time the sky began to lighten with false dawn, they were miles from the farm, high enough into the foothills that the trees had thinned and rocky cliffs became more common. "We need to rest," Zachary said quietly, leading Rasha into a small cave he had spotted. It was barely deep enough for both of them to lie down, but it was sheltered and hidden behind an outcropping that made it nearly invisible from the trail below. They collapsed inside, both exhausted and still slightly damp from the stream. Rasha's teeth were chattering from the cold, so Zachary pulled her against him, sharing what warmth he could. "I am sorry," Rasha whispered into the darkness. "I am so sorry you have to give up everything because of me." "Stop apologizing," Zachary said, holding her tighter. "I made my choice. I would make it again, 1,000 times over, even if we die out here, even then." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "But we are not going to die. We are going to survive just like we have been surviving. And we are going to find somewhere safe to build a life together. I promise you that." Rasha did not answer, but she clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a world that had become dangerously unstable. Eventually, despite the fear and discomfort, exhaustion claimed them both and they slept. They woke in the early afternoon to the sound of voices on the trail below. Zachary came awake instantly, his hand moving automatically to the knife at his belt. Beside him, Rasha was already alert, her body tense and ready for action. They barely breathed as they listened to the conversation below. Waste of time. They could be anywhere in these mountains by now. "Marcus says we check every trail and possible shelter for 3 days. If we have not found them by then, we report back to Lord Brennan and let him decide if he wants to hire more hunters. 200 gold says they are either dead from the cold or halfway to the northern wastes. That soldier probably did not even know what he was getting into, sheltering an orc. Probably thought he was being noble or some nonsense. Well, if he is still alive when we find them, he is going to learn real quick that there is nothing noble about getting between a lord and his revenge." The voices faded as the hunters moved on, but Zachary and Rasha stayed frozen for several more minutes, making sure it was safe. Finally, when they heard nothing but the wind in the pines, they carefully emerged from their hiding spot. 3 days, Rasha said quietly. "If we can evade them for 3 days, we might actually make it. Then we keep moving." Zachary checked the position of the sun, orienting himself. "We are about 2 days from the border of the deep mountains. Once we are there, human hunters rarely go further. The orc clans control that territory and they do not take kindly to trespassers. The clans might not take kindly to us either," Rasha pointed out. "A clanless orc with a human companion. We will be seen as traitors or worse. One problem at a time." Zachary shouldered his pack. "First we survive the next 3 days. Then we worry about orc clans." They set off again, moving parallel to the trails but staying out of sight whenever possible. Zachary's military training served them well, teaching him how to move quietly and use terrain for concealment. Rasha's hunting skills were equally valuable. Her ability to read signs in the forest and sense danger before it arrived, saving them from 2 more near encounters with the search parties. The second night, they found a small abandoned shepherd's hut nestled in a high valley. It was barely standing, the roof half collapsed, and the door hanging from one hinge, but it offered more shelter than sleeping in the open. They built a tiny fire using dry wood that would produce minimal smoke, cooked some of the dried meat from their packs, and tried to rest while taking turns on watch. Zachary took the first watch, sitting near the broken doorway while Rasha slept fitfully behind him. The stars were brilliant this high up, undimmed by any other light, and the silence was profound. He found himself thinking about his farm, about the life he had built there, and how quickly he had walked away from it. 2 years of hard work, abandoned in a single night. But when he looked back at Rasha, at the way she curled around herself even in sleep as if protecting vital organs, at the small frown on her face that suggested her dreams were not peaceful, he knew he had made the right choice. The farm was replaceable. Rasha was not. Cannot sleep. Rasha's voice startled him. He turned to find her propped up on one elbow watching him, just keeping watch. Your turn is not for another hour. I know. She sat up fully, wrapping the blanket they had brought around her shoulders and moved to sit beside him. What are you thinking about? The farm, you, the future. Zachary leaned back against the wall, wondering if we are completely insane or if this actually has a chance of working. Probably both. Rasha rested her head on his shoulder. We are definitely insane. But I think it might work anyway if we are lucky and clever and willing to fight for it. I am all 3 of those things when it comes to you. I know. She was quiet for a moment, then said, Zachary, if something happens to me, nothing is going to happen to you. But if it does, she continued firmly, I want you to know that these past months have been the happiest of my life. Before I met you, I thought I was going to die alone and forgotten, just another casualty of a stupid war, but you gave me something I never expected to have again. Hope, purpose, love. Whatever happens now, that was worth it. Zachary turned to face her fully, cupping her face in his hands. Nothing is going to happen to you because I am not going to let it. We are going to get through this, find somewhere safe and build the life we deserve. You, me, and whatever future we choose to make. That is not hope, Rasha. That is a promise. She kissed him then, fierce and desperate, and for a while the cold and danger and uncertainty faded away, leaving only the 2 of them and the connection they had forged in the face of impossible odds. The 3rd day dawned clear and cold, with a sharp wind that cut through their clothes and made every step a battle against the elements. They were high in the mountains now, well above the tree line in places, crossing rocky slopes and narrow passes that required careful attention to avoid falls. Zachary's legs ached and his lungs burned from the altitude, but he pushed on, knowing that every step took them closer to safety. They crested a ridge in the late afternoon and looked down at the valley beyond. It was wild and beautiful, untouched by human settlement, with a river running through its center and dense forests on either side. In the distance, barely visible through a gap in the peaks, Zachary could see smoke rising from what had to be an orc settlement. We made it, Rasha breathed beside him. That is the borderland. Human hunters will not follow us here. Then we are safe. Zachary did not dare to believe it. From the hunters, yes, from the clans. Rasha's expression was troubled. That depends on which clan controls this valley and how they feel about outsiders. They made their way down into the valley as the sun began to set, moving carefully on the steep slope. They were halfway to the valley floor when a voice called out from the rocks above them. "Stop where you are. Do not move or you die." Zachary and Rasha froze. From behind boulders on either side of the path, 6 orc warriors emerged, all armed with bows and spears. They were male, ranging in age from maybe 20 to 40, and they wore the furs and leather of mountain clan warriors. Their green skin was marked with ritual scars, and their tusks were larger and more prominent than Rasha's. Something Zachary vaguely remembered indicated male orcs versus female. "We mean no harm," Rasha called out in the orcish language, her hands spread wide to show she was unarmed. "We seek passage through your lands, nothing more." The oldest of the warriors, a broad-shouldered orc with gray streaks in his black hair, studied them with narrowed eyes. When he spoke, it was in heavily accented but understandable human common tongue, clearly for Zachary's benefit. "You are the clanless one, the exile who killed a human lord's son. There are rumors about you." "The human lord's son and his friends attacked me without provocation," Rasha said steadily. "I defended myself. That is not murder, it is survival. And the human with you." The warrior gestured at Zachary with his spear. "Why does a clanless orc travel with one of the enemy? He is not my enemy. He saved my life." Rasha moved slightly to stand closer to Zachary, a protective gesture. "His name is Zachary Holden. He is a good man, and he is under my protection." Several of the warriors laughed at that, a harsh sound, but the older one just studied them both with an unreadable expression. "My name is Thacker. I lead the Stonefist clan that controls this territory. You are trespassing, which normally means death. But you are orc, even if clanless, and that gives you the right to request sanctuary and trial." "I request sanctuary," Rasha said immediately, "and the human—" "I request sanctuary for both of us." Thacker's eyebrows rose. "That is unusual. Sanctuary for a human has not been requested in living memory. Our council will have to decide if it is even possible under clan law." "Then let them decide," Rasha said. "But until they do, we are under sanctuary law. You cannot harm us without dishonoring your clan." Thacker scowled but nodded reluctantly. "True enough. Come with us. You will be housed in the village while the council deliberates. But know this, exile, if the council decides against you, you will both be sent back to human lands. And if your human causes any trouble, sanctuary or not, he dies." "Understood, understood," Rasha said. "What did he say?" Zachary whispered to her as the warriors surrounded them, forming an escort. "That we have temporary sanctuary while a council decides our fate. Also that if you cause any problems, they will kill you." "Wonderful," Zachary muttered. "So we went from being hunted by humans to being judged by orcs. This is going great." Despite the tension, Rasha smiled slightly. "Welcome to my world. Now come on, try not to look too scared. Orcs respect courage." The Stonefist village was nestled in the valley's heart, a collection of sturdy wooden buildings arranged around a central fire pit. The architecture was different from human construction, all clean lines and practical design, with elaborate carving on the support beams. As Zachary and Rasha were escorted through the village, orcs of all ages stopped to stare. Children peeked out from doorways, their amber or brown or green eyes wide with curiosity. Female orcs, distinguishable by their smaller tusks and generally lighter builds, watched from work areas with expressions ranging from suspicion to fascination. They were taken to a building on the village's edge, a simple structure with 2 small rooms and a fireplace. "You will stay here," Thacker said. "Food will be brought at sunset. The council will meet tomorrow to hear your case. Until then, do not leave this building." "We understand," Rasha said. Thacker nodded and left, posting 2 warriors outside the door as guards. or prison guards, Zachary supposed. The distinction was probably academic at this point. Once they were alone, Zachary sank onto one of the sleeping pallets that were the room's only furnishing. So what happens now? Now we wait for the council's judgment. Rasha sat beside him, taking his hand. I will speak for us. Explain how you saved my life, how we came to be together. Clan law is complex, but it values courage, honor, and debt repayment. The fact that you saved my life and I am in your debt might work in our favor. And if it does not work in our favor, then we run again. Rasha's jaw was set. I am not letting them send you back to those hunters. We are quite a pair, Zachary said, managing a tired smile. Neither of us belongs anywhere anymore, both of us wanted by our own people, running from one danger right into another. Yes, Rasha agreed. But we are together. That has to count for something. Zachary pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. It counts for everything. They spent the night in the small building, alternately planning arguments for the council and simply holding each other, taking what comfort they could in physical closeness. True to Thacker's word, food was brought at sunset. A thick stew with vegetables and what tasted like mountain goat, along with flatbread and water. It was simple but filling, and Zachary was grateful for it after days of traveling on minimal rations. The next morning, they were escorted to the village central building, a large structure with a high ceiling and elaborate carvings depicting what Zachary assumed were important moments in clan history. The council was already assembled. 7 orcs, 4 male and 3 female, all wearing the decorated furs that seemed to indicate status. Thacker was among them, seated at the far left. At the center was an older female orc with silver-gray hair and an air of absolute authority. She studied Zachary and Rasha with piercing amber eyes for a long moment before speaking. I am Makara, elder of the Stonefist clan and keeper of our law. You stand before this council to request sanctuary for yourself and your human companion. This is unprecedented. Explain yourself. Rasha stepped forward, her spine straight and her voice clear. She spoke in Orcish, the guttural language flowing smoothly from her lips, and Zachary watched the council's faces as she told their story. He could not understand the words, but he could see reactions. Surprise, skepticism, and from Makara, something that might have been approval when Rasha finished speaking, there was silence. Then one of the male council members, younger than the others, spoke in heavily accented common tongue. You expect us to believe that a human soldier, one who fought against our clans in the war, saved your life out of simple decency. Humans do not act with such honor. Some do not, Rasha agreed, switching back to common tongue. Many do not, but Zachary Holden does. He pulled me from wolves when he could have left me to die. He stitched my wounds, set my broken arm, gave me shelter through the entire winter without asking anything in return. He protected me from hunters who would have killed us both. If that is not honor, then I do not know what is. He also gave up his home and property to flee with you, Makara said thoughtfully. That speaks to either deep honor or deep foolishness. Perhaps both, Zachary said, speaking for the first time. All eyes turned to him, and he forced himself to stand straight despite his exhaustion and fear. I am not going to pretend I understand your culture or your laws, but I know what is right. Rasha saved a human child from being killed and lost everything because of it. When I found her in my forest, dying and alone, I could not walk away. And when I learned who she was, what she had given up for the sake of a child she did not even know, I could not help but admire her. And then, he paused, knowing what he was about to say would either save them or doom them. And then I fell in love with her. The council erupted in surprised murmurs. Makara held up a hand for silence, her expression unreadable. You claim to love an orc, a being your people consider a monster. I claim to love Rasha, Zachary corrected gently. A woman who has more honor and courage than anyone I have ever met, human or orc. The fact that she is a different species is irrelevant to me. What matters is her character, her heart, and the way she makes me want to be a better man. Pretty words, the young council member said dismissively. But words are easy. Actions reveal truth. Then judge me by my actions, Zachary challenged. I gave up everything I owned to protect her. I am standing before you now, knowing you could kill me at any moment because I refuse to abandon her. What more proof do you need? Makara leaned forward, her gaze intense. There is a test in our old laws, a way to prove the depth of your commitment and determine if your heart is true. It is dangerous. You might not survive it. Are you willing? Zachary did not hesitate. Yes. No. Rasha turned to him, grabbing his arm. You do not even know what the test is. I do not need to know, Zachary said quietly, covering her hand with his. Whatever it is, I will do it. For you, for us. Makara nodded slowly, something like respect entering her expression. The test is simple in concept, though not in execution. You will go into the deep forest, to a place sacred to our people. There dwells a spirit guardian, a creature of old magic that can see into the hearts of those who approach it. If your love is true and your intentions honorable, the guardian will grant you a blessing, and you will return unharmed. If you are false, if you carry deception or ill intent, the guardian will kill you. That is not a test, that is murder, Rasha protested. The forest spirits are unpredictable. They might kill him just for being human. That is the risk he takes, Thacker said, but it is also his choice. Will you take the test, Zachary Holden? Zachary looked at Rasha, at the fear and love and desperation in her amber eyes. Then he looked back at the council. I will take your test. When do I leave? At dawn tomorrow, Makara said. Tonight you may rest and prepare yourself. Thacker will explain the ritual you must perform when you reach the sacred grove. Listen carefully, for your life depends on following the instructions exactly. They were escorted back to their small building, but this time Thacker came with them. He spent the next hour explaining the test in detail. Zachary would have to travel alone into a specific part of the forest, marked by ancient trees carved with clan symbols. At the center of that grove was a clearing where the spirit guardian dwelled. He would need to approach respectfully, present an offering of his own blood, and speak the truth of his heart out loud. Then he would wait for the guardian's judgment. What does this guardian look like? Zachary asked when Thacker had finished. It has many forms, the warrior said. Sometimes a great wolf, sometimes a bear, sometimes something that has no name in any language. Do not be frightened by its appearance. The spirits test courage as much as honesty. After Thacker left, Zachary and Rasha sat together in heavy silence. Finally, Rasha said, You do not have to do this. We can run again, try to find somewhere else. And spend the rest of our lives running. Zachary shook his head. No, I am tired of running, Rasha. I want us to have a real chance at a life together. If this test is what it takes, then I will take it gladly. What if you die? Her voice cracked on the last word. Then I die knowing I tried, knowing I did everything I could to build a future with you. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. But I am not planning on dying. I am planning on passing this test, coming back to you, and finally being allowed to live in peace. You are insane, Rasha said into his chest. Completely insane. I know, you mentioned that before. Zachary pressed a kiss to the top of her head. But I am your insane human, and you are stuck with me. Good, she said fiercely, because I am not letting you go without a fight. They held each other long into the night, neither wanting to sleep and waste their precious remaining hours together. They talked about inconsequential things and important things, about past regrets and future hopes, about all the small details of their lives that they had never quite had time to share before. Zachary told her about his childhood games and his mother's terrible singing voice. Rasha described orc festivals and the complex braiding patterns that indicated family lineage. They traded favorite foods and embarrassing stories and confessions of fears they had never voiced aloud before. And when words ran out, they simply held each other in the darkness, memorizing the feeling of being together, just in case dawn came too quickly. Zachary dressed in his simplest clothes at Thacker's instruction and was given a small knife for the blood offering. Rasha walked with him to the edge of the village where Thacker waited with directions to the sacred grove. "Be respectful," Thacker said, his tone surprisingly gentle. "Be honest. The spirits value truth above all things, and do not be afraid to show vulnerability. Sometimes acknowledging fear is the greatest courage." "Thank you," Zachary said, and meant it. Thacker nodded and stepped away, leaving Zachary and Rasha alone for one final moment. "Come back to me," Rasha said, her hands fisted in his shirt. "Promise me you will come back." "I promise," Zachary said, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I love you, Rasha. Remember that no matter what happens." "I love you too," she whispered. "Now go before I change my mind and drag you away from here." Zachary forced himself to turn and walk away, following the path Thacker had indicated. He did not look back, knowing that if he saw Rasha's face one more time, he might not have the strength to keep going. The forest was old and dark, the trees massive and close together. Strange sounds echoed through the branches, birds or animals. Zachary could not tell which. The carved symbols Thacker had described appeared after about an hour of walking, ancient markings cut deep into tree trunks and filled with what looked like some kind of permanent stain. They glowed faintly in the dim forest light, a subtle magic that made the hair on Zachary's arms stand up. He followed the symbols deeper, his heart pounding harder with each step, until finally he emerged into a clearing. It was circular, perhaps 30 feet across, with grass that seemed unnaturally green and flowers that Zachary did not recognize. At the clearing's center was a flat stone, clearly meant as an altar, and standing beside that stone was the guardian. It looked like a wolf at first glance, but no natural wolf had ever been that large or moved with such fluid grace. Its fur was silver gray and seemed to shimmer with its own light, and its eyes were a brilliant, unsettling blue that reflected far too much intelligence for any animal. When it opened its mouth, Zachary could see teeth like knives, but when it spoke, its voice was surprisingly gentle. "Another supplicant comes to the sacred grove," the guardian said, its voice seeming to come from everywhere at once. "Speak your name and purpose, human." Zachary's mouth was dry, but he forced himself to speak clearly. "My name is Zachary Holden. I come to prove the truth of my heart and my intentions toward Rasha of no clan whom I love." "Love." The guardian walked slowly around him, its massive body circling like a predator assessing prey. "Love between human and orc. Such things were common once in the elder days before your peoples chose hatred over understanding, but it has been many centuries since such a bond was claimed. Why should I believe you?" "Because I am here," Zachary said, surprising himself with his steadiness. "Because I gave up everything I own to protect her. Because when I look at her, I see not an orc or an enemy, but simply the woman I want to spend my life with. Because the thought of a future without her is more terrifying than standing before you now." "Pretty words," the guardian said, echoing the council member from the day before. "But are they true? Give me your blood as tradition demands, and I will see your heart for myself." Zachary approached the altar and used the small knife to cut his palm, letting blood drip onto the stone. The moment it touched the surface, the blood began to glow with a faint golden light. The guardian moved to the altar and lowered its massive head, somehow breathing in the light as if it were a scent. Then it looked directly at Zachary, and those blue eyes seemed to bore into his soul. "I see your fear," the guardian said softly. "Fear of failure, fear of death, fear of losing the one you love. But beneath the fear I see determination, loyalty, a willingness to sacrifice anything for another's happiness. And yes," the guardian's tone shifted to something almost like wonder, "I see love, true and deep and unshakable. You spoke truth, Zachary Holden. Your heart is honest." Relief flooded through Zachary so intensely that his knees nearly buckled. "Then I pass the test." "You pass," the guardian confirmed, "but I offer you something more. A gift, for the rarity of your bond and the courage it took to defend it. Approach." Zachary took a hesitant step forward. The guardian bent its head and touched its nose to Zachary's forehead. There was a flash of cold and light, and suddenly Zachary could feel something settling into his mind, a new awareness that had not been there before. "I have given you the gift of understanding," the guardian said. "You will now speak and understand the orcish tongue as if born to it. And I have placed my mark upon you. Any orc with the sight will see it and know that you have been judged worthy by the old spirits. This will grant you respect and safe passage among those who still honor the old ways." "Thank you," Zachary breathed, overwhelmed by the generosity of the gift. "Thank me by treasuring what you have found," the guardian said. "True love is precious and rare. Do not waste it. Now go, return to your beloved and begin the life you have earned." Zachary did not need to be told twice. He bowed respectfully to the guardian, then turned and ran back through the forest, following his own trail, his heart soaring with hope and relief. When he burst out of the tree line, he saw Rasha pacing frantically near the village entrance. The moment she spotted him, she ran, closing the distance between them at a sprint, and crashed into him so hard they both nearly fell over. "You are alive," she gasped, holding him so tightly he could barely breathe. "You are alive and you came back." "I promised I would," Zachary said into her hair. "The guardian judged me worthy. We passed the test, Rasha. We passed." She pulled back to look at him, and he saw tears streaming down her green cheeks. "You are sure? The guardian truly gave you its blessing, it did, and more." Zachary touched his forehead where the guardian had marked him, then spoke in perfect orcish, the words flowing as naturally as breathing. "It gave me the ability to speak your language and marked me as worthy to any who can see such things." Rasha's eyes went wide, her hand coming up to touch his face. "I can see it," she whispered in orcish. "A silver mark like moonlight on your skin. Zachary, do you understand what this means? The guardian has not given such a gift in generations. You are recognized not just by the Stonefist clan, but by all clans who honor the old ways. We will have safe passage anywhere the old laws still hold." "Which is most of the mountain territories," Thacker said, approaching with the rest of the council behind him. "The sacred guardian's judgment supersedes clan law. You are both granted full sanctuary and permission to settle in our lands if you wish. The council has voted to offer you a homestead in the Eastern Valley, where you can live in peace." Zachary turned to Makara, who was smiling for the first time since they had met. "You would truly let us stay. Let us build a life here. The spirits have spoken," Makara said simply. "And the spirits are wiser than any council. You have proven your worth, Zachary Holden. You and Rasha are welcome in our clan. Not as guests, but as members, if you will have us." Zachary looked at Rasha, saw the hope and disbelief and joy in her amber eyes, and knew what his answer would be. "We will have you," he said in orcish, his new language skills feeling more natural with each word. and we would be honored to join your clan. The celebration that night was unlike anything Zachary had ever experienced. The Stonefist clan gathered around the central fire pit, and there was food and drink and music that was both strange and beautiful to Zachary's ears. Orcs played drums made from stretched hide and flutes carved from bone, creating rhythms that seemed to echo the heartbeat of the mountains themselves. Zachary and Rasha were formally welcomed into the clan with a ceremony that involved ritual scarring. Zachary tried not to flinch as Makara carved the clan symbol into his upper arm with surprising gentleness, and the exchange of gifts. The clan gave them tools, seeds for planting, and 2 young goats to start their own herd. In return, Zachary offered what skills he had: his knowledge of human farming techniques, his experience as a soldier that could help train warriors, and his willingness to work hard. As the night wore on and the celebration continued, Zachary found himself sitting beside the fire with Rasha tucked against his side, watching the clan members dance and sing. Children ran around the fire, playing games that transcended species in their universal joy. Warriors laughed and told stories, their fierce exteriors softened by ale and good company. Family groups huddled together, sharing food and affection in ways that reminded Zachary achingly of his own childhood. "What are you thinking?" Rasha asked, her hand finding his. "That I have finally found what I was looking for when I bought that farm 2 years ago," Zachary said quietly. "A place to belong, a community, a home. And me." Rasha's tone was teasing, but he could hear the real question underneath. "Especially you." Zachary turned to face her fully, not caring that half the clan was probably watching them. "Rasha, these past months with you have been the best of my life. You challenge me, you make me laugh, you make me want to be better than I am. I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love anyone. And now that we have a real chance at a future together, I have to ask you something." He pulled out a small object he had been working on in secret during their nights in the small building while Rasha slept. It was a ring, carved from a piece of wood he had found in the forest, smoothed and polished until it gleamed softly. Etched into its surface was a simple pattern, a wolf and a human hand intertwined. "I do not have gold or jewels," Zachary said, holding up the ring. "But I have this, and I have my heart, and I have a promise to give you my whole life if you will have it. Rasha of the Stonefist clan, will you marry me?" The celebration around them had gone quiet, everyone watching and waiting. Rasha stared at the ring, at Zachary's face, and for a moment he thought he had made a terrible mistake, had asked too much too soon. Then she smiled, that full, radiant smile that lit up her entire face, and said in a voice that carried across the entire gathering, "Yes. Yes, I will marry you, Zachary Holden." The clan erupted in cheers and applause. Zachary slipped the wooden ring onto Rasha's finger, and she kissed him with such joy and passion that he forgot about the watching crowd, forgot about everything except the feeling of having found exactly where he was meant to be. Makara approached them when they finally broke apart, still grinning like fools. "There will need to be a ceremony," the elder said, her eyes twinkling. "Proper rituals to bind you in the eyes of the clan and the spirits. But that can wait for the spring planting when it is traditional to celebrate new unions. For now, simply enjoy this moment. You have both earned it." "Thank you," Rasha said, her voice thick with emotion, "for everything, for giving us a chance, for accepting us, for being a clan worth joining," Zachary finished. Makara nodded, then surprised them both by pulling them into a brief but genuine hug. "Welcome home," she said simply. The next weeks passed in a blur of activity and adjustment. Zachary and Rasha were given a plot of land in the Eastern Valley, a beautiful spot where a small stream ran through fertile soil and old-growth forest provided both shelter and building materials. With help from clan members, they began constructing a house, this time using orcish building techniques that Zachary found were actually more efficient than the human methods he knew. The house rose slowly but steadily, with thick walls designed to withstand mountain winters and a clever system of vents that allowed for heating while minimizing smoke. They built a small barn for their goats and chickens, garden beds for vegetables, and a storage shed for tools and supplies. Every evening, exhausted from the day's work, they would sit together and watch the sun set over the mountains, marveling at how far they had come. Zachary learned to navigate clan politics and social structures, which were complicated but ultimately based on respect, capability, and honor, rather than the rigid class systems he was used to from human society. He taught interested clan members about crop rotation and preservation techniques he had learned from his father. He sparred with warriors who wanted to learn human fighting styles, and in turn learned orcish combat techniques that emphasized strength and leverage in ways that complemented his existing skills. Rasha thrived in ways Zachary had never seen during their time at his farm. Surrounded by her own people again, speaking her native language and participating in familiar rituals, she seemed to grow more confident and more herself with each passing day. She rekindled her hunting skills, going out with clan hunting parties and returning with meat that fed not just them but several other families. She laughed more, relaxed more, and sometimes Zachary would catch her looking at him with such profound happiness that it made his chest ache. They were building a life together, and it was better than anything Zachary had dared to imagine. Spring came to the mountains in a rush of snowmelt and wildflowers. The valley transformed from white and brown to a riot of green and color, and with the warming weather came the clan's planting festival. It was a 3-day celebration that combined the practical work of planting crops with rituals of blessing and thanks to the spirits of earth and growth. And on the second day of the festival, under a sky so blue it hurt to look at, Zachary and Rasha were married. The ceremony was held at dawn in a grove of ancient trees that the clan considered sacred. Makara officiated, speaking in the formal orcish that was used for rituals, while the entire Stonefist clan gathered to witness. Zachary and Rasha stood face to face, hands clasped, while Makara bound their wrists together with a cord woven from grasses and blessed by the clan's spirit talker. Before the spirits of earth and sky, of forest and stone, we witness this binding, Makara intoned. Zachary Holden of the humans and Rasha of the Stonefist clan, do you come here of your own free will to pledge your lives and hearts to one another? We do, they said in unison, Zachary speaking in perfect orcish. Then speak your vows that all may hear the promises you make. Rasha went first, her voice strong and clear. Zachary, when you found me in the forest, I was dying and alone. You gave me life when you had every reason to let me die. You gave me shelter when I had nowhere to go. You gave me love when I thought I would never be loved again. I promise to stand beside you in all things, to honor you with my strength, to cherish you with my heart, and to build with you a life worthy of the gift we have been given. Then it was Zachary's turn. He looked into Rasha's amber eyes and spoke from the depths of his soul. Rasha, you taught me that the world is bigger and more beautiful than I ever understood. You showed me that honor and courage exist in places I was taught to fear. You gave me a reason to fight when I was tired of fighting, and a home when I had lost my way. I promise to love you without reservation, to respect you without condition, to protect you with all my strength, and to spend every day proving myself worthy of the incredible gift of your love." Makara smiled and began unwinding the cord from their wrists. As she did, she spoke the final blessing. "By the authority given to me by this clan and the spirits that watch over us, I declare you bound together. From this day forward, you are family, partners, and mates in the eyes of all who honor the old ways. May your union be blessed with joy, children, and long life. May you face troubles together and celebrate victories together. May you never forget the love that brought you to this moment." She finished unwinding the cord and tied it into a circle, which she placed over both their heads so it rested around both their necks like a shared necklace. "This cord represents your bond. Keep it safe, keep it sacred, and let it remind you always of the vows you made here today." The clan erupted in cheers and celebration, and Zachary pulled Rasha into his arms and kissed her, tasting salt from happy tears, his or hers. He could not tell. When they finally broke apart, they were swarmed by clan members offering congratulations and gifts, swept up into the celebration that continued throughout the day and long into the night. But later, when the festivities finally wound down and they walked back to their new home under a sky full of stars, it was just the two of them again. The house was dark and quiet, but it felt warm and welcoming in a way that had nothing to do with physical temperature. "We did it," Rasha said wonderingly as they stood in the doorway, looking into their home. "We actually did it. We survived and found a place to belong and got married. It does not even seem real." "It is real," Zachary assured her, pulling her close. "This is our life now. Our home, our clan, our future. Everything we fought for, everything we risked, it all led here." "I love you," Rasha said, turning in his arms to face him. "I have said it before, but I need to say it again on our wedding day. I love you, Zachary Holden. I love you for saving me, for seeing me, for choosing me over everything else. I love you for being brave enough to love someone different and stubborn enough to refuse to let the world tell you it was wrong." "I love you too," Zachary said, his voice rough with emotion. "And I would do it all again, every hard choice and scary moment, just to end up right here with you." They stood there for a moment longer, holding each other in the doorway of their home, and then Zachary swept Rasha up into his arms and carried her across the threshold, both of them laughing at the silly human tradition that he insisted on following. Their wedding night was everything it should be. Tender and passionate, full of whispered promises and joyful discoveries. A celebration of two people who had found each other against impossible odds and refused to let anything stand in the way of their love. And when they finally fell asleep, tangled together in their marriage bed, Zachary thought that of all the battles he had fought and all the choices he had made, bringing Rasha home that day in the forest had been the most important decision of his entire life. The years that followed were not without challenges, but they were good years, full of hard work and simple joys. Zachary and Rasha's homestead prospered, their fields producing abundant crops and their livestock multiplying. They became respected members of the Stonefist clan, Zachary serving as a liaison when the clan needed to trade with human settlements, and Rasha teaching the younger generation of hunters the skills she had perfected during her time alone in the wilderness. Their first child, a daughter they named Kara, was born in the autumn of their second year together. She had Rasha's green skin and amber eyes, but Zachary's dark blonde hair and smaller tusks that were barely visible even when she smiled. The clan welcomed her with great celebration, seeing her as a symbol of the bridges that could be built between different peoples, proof that love could transcend the divisions that had caused so much pain. 2 years later, a son followed, whom they named Garrett. He had more human features than his sister, but the pointed ears and strength of his orc heritage. Both children grew up speaking both languages fluently, comfortable in both cultures, and Zachary and Rasha were determined to teach them about the full richness of their dual heritage. Other changes came with time. The Stonefist clan began cautiously reaching out to human communities, establishing trading relationships that benefited both sides. Zachary served as a translator and mediator, using his unique position to help both peoples see each other as potential partners rather than eternal enemies. It was slow work, and not everyone on either side was happy about it, but gradually, carefully, progress was made. Sometimes, late at night when the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Zachary and Rasha would sit together by their fireplace and reflect on the journey that had brought them to this moment. They would remember that day in the forest, when a human farmer made the choice to help an injured orc instead of walking away. They would talk about the fear and uncertainty of those early days, the desperate flight through winter mountains, the guardian's test, and the overwhelming relief of finally finding acceptance. "You ever regret it?" Rasha asked one evening, her head resting on Zachary's shoulder. "Giving up your farm, your old life, everything you built in the human lands?" "Never," Zachary said without hesitation. "That life was safe and quiet, but it was also lonely. This life, our life here, is everything I never knew I wanted. I have you, our children, a community that accepts us." "What could I possibly regret?" "I regret that we had to go through so much pain to get here," Rasha said quietly. "I wish the world was different. I wish we could have simply met and fallen in love without it being dangerous or forbidden." "Maybe someday it will not be," Zachary said. "Maybe our children, or their children, will grow up in a world where love between humans and orcs is not seen as something strange or wrong. Maybe we are just the beginning." "I would like that," Rasha said. "I would like to think that what we went through mattered, that it helped make the world a little bit better." "It did," Zachary assured her. "We are living proof that the old hatreds do not have to define the future. Every day we spend together, every bridge we build between our peoples, is a small act of rebellion against the way things have always been. And that matters, even if we never see the full results in our lifetime." Rasha was quiet for a moment, then lifted her head to look at him. "You have become wise in your old age, husband." "I am 37, Zachary protested. "That is not old." "It is older than when I met you," Rasha teased. "Back then you were young and reckless enough to bring home an injured orc and fall in love with her." "Young and reckless worked out pretty well for me," Zachary said, pulling her close for a kiss. "I think I will keep being young and reckless for as long as you will put up with me." "Then you can be young and reckless for the rest of your life," Rasha said against his lips. "Because I am never letting you go." And she did not. They lived together in their mountain homestead for the rest of their long lives, raising their children and eventually grandchildren, always working to build bridges between the peoples that had once been enemies. They grew old together, their hair graying and their bodies slowing, but their love remaining as strong as it had been that day in the snowy woods when Zachary first brought Rasha home. When Zachary finally died, an old man surrounded by family and friends, his last words were to Rasha. "Thank you," he whispered, his weathered hand holding hers, "for everything, for loving me, for giving me a life worth living, for being my greatest adventure." "Thank you for saving me," Rasha whispered back, tears streaming down her green cheeks. "Not just from the wolves, but from giving up on everything good in the world. I love you, Zachary Holden. I always will." He smiled, squeezed her hand one last time, and then he was gone, his spirit returning to the mountains he had come to love. Rasha lived several years more, long enough to see her youngest grandchild born, and to know that her family would thrive without her. When her own time came, she went peacefully in her sleep, and the clan buried her beside Zachary on the hillside overlooking their homestead. 2 graves side by side under the great pines. The Stonefist clan never forgot them. Their story was told around fires for generations. The tale of the human farmer who saved an orc woman from wolves, and the love that changed both their lives. It became a reminder that courage, compassion, and love could overcome even the deepest divisions, that what united people was far stronger than what separated them. And high in the mountain valley where they had built their life together, their descendants continued the work they had started, building bridges between peoples and proving every day that a better world was possible, one small choice at a time. It all began with a farmer who chose to run toward the screaming instead of away from it, who chose compassion over fear, and who proved that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is simply to love someone the world says they should not love. And in the end, that choice, that love, changed everything.